Welcome to Project Fast Fish here on Mike's Motorworks, and today it's all about making connections. That's right, we're finally putting our subframe connectors onto Project Fast Fish, as well as our front and our rear torque boxes. And if I can do it, you can do it. You don't want to miss it. It all happens right now. Today, as you can see, we're filming things a little bit differently, and that's because my primary camera equipment rutted out on me, and that means a replacement is going to be required in the near future. However, we still need to move forward with our recording as much as we need to move forward with our project. So let's go ahead and get you up to date. Now, before that camera crudted out on me, I went ahead and recorded this footage. This is the underside of Project Fast Fish. I mentioned on the last video that I was going to get some things touched up, and sure enough, I took care of it. I got all these battened back down and taken care of right here on the lip here. And then, of course, got all this taken care of, all the little spots ground down, and I even painted it up into here with some epoxy primer in preparation for the things going on today. Now, if you haven't seen my previous videos on Project Fast Fish, I make a few mentions about the E-body, or the Barracuda and the Challenger, being a unibody car. Well, what exactly is a unibody car? Well, I'm going to play some images here in the background, but basically you have two different types of car designs. Design number one is a body on frame, where there's literally a chassis or a frame and you stick the body on top of it, which is what most of the cars were all the way through about the 1970s and even further, depending on the year, make, and model. Now, in the probably the mid-60s, you started seeing companies like Chrysler and Dodge, or the Mopar companies, start using what they call a unibody. And what a unibody is everything is uniform. There is one unified body on frame, okay? All right, you basically have your back side of the frame, and it goes up to here, and then it kind of disappears. Well, it doesn't really disappear because it transfers the energy and the support to these rocker panels. And this is just boxed in sheet metal here. There's nothing really fancy. It's not like a high-grade steel or a girder, if you will. And then, of course, it translates the energies back down here and then up through the rest of the vehicle. Now, up front, you got your front suspension and K-member. And, of course, in the back, you have your leaf springs and differential, right? In modern cars, you don't have the leaf springs, but you get the idea. The thing with the early unibodies is that when they were running on bias ply tires, it was fine for this setup. The larger motors, such as the 440 and the Hemi, came with torque boxes. There was a torque box here to help brace this area up and provide additional support, as opposed to just relying on this little wee panel here to hold up the firewall, and then this panel here going down, holding where the torsion bars go to the front, okay? So it gave additional support up here, and then there was an additional box that went back over here between this panel here. Then, of course, this is where you're receiving a lot of the load from the car, because you have the leaf spring, the front leaf spring, which has a leaf spring mount here, and then, of course, it's bolted through, and then, of course, you know, there's a lot of pressure and force on that leaf spring itself, and, of course, there's a box here to help keep things in place, and, of course, the other leaf spring mounts way back there. Now, in modern tires and for modern performance, all right, these cars flex a whole lot more than, well, the newer performance requirements would like to see. So what people started doing was adding subframe connectors to their unibody cars, especially for the earlier generation. And what subframe connectors do is they connect, well, the sub under, right, frame, which is on the Unibody car here, right, all the way to the back, and they connect them with a rod. Now, there's a couple ways to do that. You could do that with some tubing. You could do that with some square tubing. People have even come in and cut their floorboards and such in this area to get that tubing in there. And there's several different ways. There's even bolt-ons that you can bolt on through here, and it hangs super low on the under the frame or under the car itself, which works. Now, what I went with was the US Cartool subframe connector, and I chose that because, one, it doesn't impinge on the space up here, right? On this side of the vehicle, it doesn't impinge on the footwells and such. Not that a lot of people are riding in the back, but you get the idea. And it creates a nice, strong component and sits slightly higher up than the typical bolt-ons. You see the bolt-ons hang a little bit low, and so the Weld-in Subframe connectors from US Cartool kind of follow this line. I'll show you that line here in a few moments. Additionally, I went ahead and got the torque boxes from US Cartool, which will indeed fill in just like those factory torque boxes from the Mopar, right? So you will get the torque box into here, and of course the torque box up here to kind of get everything nice and tight to help improve some of the stiffening of this vehicle. Now, you could take that those components a whole lot further, but for my application, I think that what I have is more than sufficient for the handling and the horsepower on this particular vehicle. These are the torque boxes from US Cartool. These are the front torque boxes here, and these are the rear torque boxes there. And you can clearly tell the difference because you need to access your front leaf spring shackle mounts from these spots here. I'm going to show you that here in a few moments. And of course, these go right in the front where I showed you earlier on in the video, and I'm going to show you here again shortly. Now, when they come to you, they'll be boxed together if you get all of them as a set, and they, of course, will be unpainted, so you're going to have to do whatever kind of protection that you need to do on them. We're going to do ours here in a few moments. So what they effectively do is they go ahead and they fit on the vehicle thusly. Now, when you put these in, there's a couple of things you got to remember, okay? One, all right, this is your first time doing it, things are not going to fit exact right out of the box. There's subtle differences. So US Cartool made these bigger than what they need to be. So obviously I have some trimming to do to get this to fit in properly. Well, what's proper fit look like? Well, effectively, you're going to have these holes here match up with the center of these holes here. We're almost there, but not quite. Additionally, if you look over here, let me get the screen on here. Additionally, if you look over here, you can see that there's a pretty big gap here. So this plate needs to move back a little bit and then be massaged into place. So there's going to be some grinding and some cutting that's needed to be done on that, and I'll show you how I do it. These are the torque boxes for the rear, and all these are way too big to go in now. You can kind of see how these work, right? Now, this isn't into place. It needs to be definitely moved up a few inches, but this part here needs to be ground down, and all these will kind of need to be ground to fit into there. Ideally, there should be a nice weld that I would create from about here and down, and of course, up into there wherever I could reach. And it's going to be scooted as much forward as I can while still being able to maintain the weld there. And as you saw earlier, that box right here allows you to access the bolts that represent the front leaf shackle mounts there. These are the subframe connectors from US Cartool. And you can see, again, just like the front torque boxes, these come in just raw steel. Now, you'll notice as you pull them out that they are a little bit oily, right? And they do need to have some preparation done on the inside if that's something that you're considering for your vehicle. The work that we've done previously on Project Fastfish necessitates that we go ahead and give these the same treatment as we've given the rest of the frame or underframe or subframe structure. Now, these themselves are easily identified on which side they go on. All right, L and R. All right, that's easy enough. Do you need to weld those L's and R's in? Not really, unless you just want to smooth them out and fill them when you get them in there, okay? But you'll notice that they already come kind of contoured. However, these contours won't fit every vehicle, because every vehicle is different. Example, on ours, we recently replaced all of the floor pans. And while I did my best to ensure that there was a factory-like distance from the bottom of the floor pans to the ground, okay, to make sure that the front or the floor pan wasn't sagging, if you will, these aren't going to fit every single vehicle, because there are slight differences or slight tolerances even from the manufacturer. So even if you still have factory floorboards that by chance made it for the 50 years it's been on the road, okay, you still need to go ahead and modify these to fit perfectly. And if you know anything about welding, if you have a big gap, big gaps equal ugly and weak welds. So you don't want ugly and weak welds. Now, eventually, we're just going to go ahead and cut these little tabs off here because those definitely aren't needed. I went ahead and checked that earlier, but I have not done any cutting or pre-fitting. So what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and treat the little bit of surface rust that I have in there with a little bit of sandpaper and some Osvo. I'm going to clean up the insides, if you will, with, again, a little sandpaper, and I'm going to put some epoxy primer in there, and I'm going to do the same exact thing with the torque boxes. After the paint dries, I will then be able to start doing my initial fits. Now, a couple of quick notes that you'll notice about these, okay? One, see this piece right here? This doesn't exactly match up. Why doesn't it match up? Well, again, they didn't know the distance between here and here. Well, they did know because of measuring, but again, to compensate for each car. So there's going to be a lot of welding that's required for these pieces, especially back there as we start getting things tighter and around that edge and such. So it's going to take some work to get this in, a lot of cutting and a lot of measuring. But first, let's go ahead and take care of prep. Right now, these things are drying in preparation for some xylene. I say drying because I just put some Osvo in there just to neutralize that surface rust that was in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and take a clean rag, spray some xylene in there, and then, of course, go ahead and wipe this down with a clean rag before I put the epoxy primer on there. Checking in on where things are at here, we can see that the panel does fit in nicely now. And I'll tell you how I did that here in just a second. Let me just get a quick set here so that I can have video evidence that it was done correctly, if you will. Alrighty, so there we go. Alright, so what I basically did was took my paint marker, and then with my paint marker, I outlined the areas that needed to be brought in. Now, it wasn't perfect. You see, I missed a spot over there. That's fine. No big deal. I'll take care of that. But basically, I kind of set everything so that I could trace what was needed to be cut out, and then I could start welding, bending, and tacking this into place. In fact, the first thing that I'll do comes time to implement or put this into place is I will basically go through and put a clamp here on the top, so where my finger is there, I'll put a clamp through and clamp it up there. And then once it's clamped into place, I'll start banging in these little plug welds. And once I get those plug welded, I'll be able to work the rest of it just by banging with the hammer and folding that and molding that into place. Over here on this side, it's just a matter of doing a quick weld in those spots. And you can see I left myself plenty of raw metal so that I don't get a whole lot of extra stuff when I'm trying to weld, so I get good clean welds, because I do not want these to move. These are structural components. And so I made sure that I can get all that taken care of. Now on the bottom here, what I'll have to do is once those areas are welded into place, I'll have to take a hammer and hammer this down so that it fits and is formed in there. And it should work out awesomely. For this panel, I did the same thing. You can kind of see here where it's nice and good and tight up there. And of course, I'll be able to work it in over here. Again, I used a paint marker and kind of got this all ground away where I needed it to. What really needed attention was over here. Now, if you're looking at that gap saying, okay, Mike, what about that gap there? I have the subframe connector to worry about, but I should be able to get this set and worked around once that subframe connector is in. Now, playing in the background, you should see where I am laying down and trying to get things kind of measured and cut into place. The basic premise here is that you lift the subframe connectors up to the car itself, figure out where it's touching at, and then go ahead and grind off where it's touching at so that everything fits smoothly between the bottom floor pan and the top of the subframe connector. Now, there were two different problems with this. Problem number one, I was using a floor jack, and that floor jack is on an arc. And that arc, when it got to the top of the arc itself, with that subframe connector there, it wasn't really consistent on how I put that subframe connector and measured it out each time. And it got to the point where even though I pressed up against the body of the car itself, it didn't work out well with me. Now, I could have put floor jacks into key areas to keep the car from tilting and rolling when I pushed it up there and really got it going. But even then, I was worried that things weren't working out. In fact, I started grinding a little bit more away from a certain section than I should have, and things weren't working out right. So then I had to have a change in the way that I was putting this thing on. What I ended up doing is ended up using some tie straps and tie downs to kind of help press that subframe connector up and into the car itself. And that worked out pretty good for me. In fact, it really helped seal those gaps in and what have you. But nothing was exactly perfect, which sometimes happens, and that's no big deal. Now, a lot of the guys that have done this in the past, what they've done is they have the complete suspension on the car, and if the car is sitting on the ground resting, and then they go ahead and set these subframe connectors into place. They measure and cut, wherever it's touching, they cut, and so on. Now, what I could have done is gone ahead and, get the car, even though it's on the rotisserie, I could have flattened the car out, if you will, put it on floor jacks in the key positions underneath the differential and underneath the front suspension, or that K-member, where that K-member goes, and then push that floor jack with the subframe connector on it up into the car and cut and measured. And that would have worked out fine. But I still would have been combating the natural arch of the floor jack, which was causing some discrepancies in the way that it's set up there. In other words, every time I put it up there, I didn't get the exact same fitment each time, and that led to several problems. How cool is this? Despite my amateur welding status, I think we did this all right. Again, not professional work. If you want professional work, you got to pay for it. But this is the whole idea of if I can do it, you can do it. So I think things turned out pretty darn decent there. So for all those keyboard warriors out there, if you will, yeah, I know, hey, this could be better. Oh, hire a professional. That's not the idea. The idea is do it yourself. And if you can do it competently, you should be all right. So what I will eventually do is go through, and once this is all down and sanded and then primed, I'm going to take some seam sealer and then run a bead of seam sealer all throughout here and then smooth it down with a popsicle stick and kind of clean this up so you can hardly even see a majority of that. And that'll all be even before I put on the undercoating. I'm going to use spray-on Herculiner for various reasons. So there you go. But overall, really happy. Now, as far as lessons learned, if I were to do this again, here are a couple of things that I would do differently. Number one, I would go through and probably put this on floor stands I put the whole car on floor stands so that I'm not having any kind of tilt when I'm trying to match these up. And I would use a Sharpie, not a paint marker, and then I would be really careful about how to get these extra super close. Lesson learned. Another lesson that I would have learned from this too, notice here how it kind of warped and caved in, or caved out depending on, how you had it. I had to push it back in. But what happened is by doing that, I left a little extra gap here. Now I could have ground this off before I welded it and then kind of cleaned it up, and you probably wouldn't even notice it unless you had the car up and we're looking at that specifically. But what has saved me from all that is waiting to weld this up here. I should have held off to do that. In other words, what I should have done is I should have welded this side on and this side on, then finished here and made sure that all this was nice and flat. Lesson learned. That's how we learn. We learn by doing. So what else needs to be addressed? Well, before I come back and do my final follow-up on this, I do have a few things to look at here. One, I have to weld this part of the torque box. If I zoom out here, you can see that this torque box turned out really, really awesome. The welds were all nice and good and clean through here. And then, of course, I got this side taken care of. Oh, look how clean those are up there, right? And then, of course, this is all done. But I still need to take care of this up here. Okay, and then I need to take care of these inside here, and that's on both of the front torque boxes. So I'm going to go ahead and address that before I turn this back over and clean up the other side, and then we'll have a follow-up here shortly. I got one more segment to take care of before I come back and see, but let me get a zoom out of this so you can kind of see how things are looking. How about them apples right there? Man, this is going to be one happy fish when all said and done. Earlier on in the video, I mentioned that I was not going to worry about trimming this area over here on the left side where my pinky is, because we had concerns with where the subframe connector itself was going to land at. Now, I had these matched up and they were good, that if the subframe connector was not in place, these could have been welded in, and while there was a little bit of wiggle, we could have compensated for it and what have you. Well, as you see here, it is now time to go ahead and get these set into place. And there's an obvious thing that needs to be cut off, and that is down there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that little tab off. But if you look over from this area, I don't know if you could see it in there, right? Just where my thumb is, there is, well, a place where that is going to kind of have to be trimmed up as well. So I'm going to get my trim on, and we're going to match it up and see if we can make this fit. And then we'll do a few other things before we get this welded into place. Currently, we got everything trimmed up and ready to go for welding. You can see we got nice, good lines that we can weld onto there. It's a little extra gappy up there, so I might take a few strikes with the hammer up there at top to bring this a little bit closer. But overall, I think the fit is pretty darn spectacular. Now, I know you can't tell it with this thing in there, but inside here, I went ahead and sprayed some Herculiner spray, some undercoating, because the whole underside of the car is going to be undercoated, and I didn't want to miss that. Now, if you're thinking, okay, Mike, well, what about the clamps here? Well, again, I sprayed it on the inside around the walls and wasn't too concerned with the stuff that I'm clamped to itself. So everything is really, really awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and weld these up here, and to follow up on some other welds, I'm going to show you that here in a minute. But basically, I got to run a bead all around, even up top here. So I'm going to have to flip the car to where I can get to it. And I might be welding on my knees, if you will, and then get around and down. Well, I promised a look at how things turned out. And as you can see, everything turned out pretty awesome. Really happy with this process, considering it's the first time that I've had a chance to do something like that. And of course, as you can see here, things turned out pretty darn decently here on the rear torque panels. Now I still have to weld one more part in here that I forgot about, but other than that, things are looking really fantastic. So I'm going to take a quick step away and kind of observe how things are. And let's see if this thing will let me zoom in a little bit here. There we go, just like that. And yeah, that looks fantastic. Like I said earlier, this is going to be one Happy fish. This body looks like it's going to stay pretty stiff during the harder corners and the acceleration that we're going to be able to provide with the few suspension upgrades and with the larger, more powerful power plant. So what's next for Project Fastfish? Well, I got a couple of things that I need to get taken care of. Part of that is inside the vehicle itself. Alrighty, I got a couple of different welds I got to finish getting a little bit more flatter, if you will. And there's a few little odds and ends I need to take care of in there. And then, of course, on the underside here, which you just saw an image of, we're going to go ahead and get this thing sanded down and ready for epoxy primer, making way for the seam sealer. And I hope to bring you an episode on the seam sealer, as well as in the future getting this thing full of Herculiner undercoating. And why in the world would I go with a bed liner? Well, there's a couple different reasons for that. Reason number one, okay, is this is going to be a driver. I didn't want to have just straight up paint underneath there and for that to be chipped away. So I wanted some sort of undercoating. I didn't want to use the rubberized undercoating, so I wanted to do something that was a little bit more robust. Therefore, it nearly necessitates using that Herculiner. Then on top of that, you know, I'll be straight up, I'm not trying to hide anything underneath here. And a lot of people make that argument, oh, you're just trying to hide something, that's why you're going to put the undercoating on there. Not so much, all right? So, yeah, the thing is long endeavoring protection, and because it'll just take this thing to the next level, all right? Especially this is my first time around. Now, if this was a straight up show car, then maybe not. I would probably do things a little bit differently, but because it's going to be driven regularly, you know, hey, let's go ahead and get that coating on there. Now, why Herculiner, not Raptor liner? Well, I understand. Raptor liner, you can tint. That means you can put the paint in and such. And with Herculiner, I think it holds up a little bit better, just a hair better than Raptor liner itself. And I think the Herculiner is going to be the best way to go for me. So I'm going to use that new spray on Herculiner. On top of that, with the Herculiner, you can use any urethane top coating. So I hope to be able to go ahead and get that on there. So hopefully on the next episode, you'll be able to see not necessarily the bed liner, but at least see the next steps of the car as I get ready for sealing the underside itself. And we'll see if I can figure out how to put seam sealer on for the first time. And don't forget, if I can do it, you can do it. Thanks for watching.